The U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi says that plans for continuing government should President Donald Trump become incapacitated remain in place. This after President Trump and his wife Melania tested positive for the COVID-19 coronavirus. President Donald Trump for months has been downplaying the impact of the coronavirus, famously saying that the virus would simply go away. Let's listen to some of his comments over time regarding this deadly pandemic.
Part of the thing is you want to keep it the way it is. You don't want to see panic because there's no reason to be panicked about. But when I mentioned the flu, I said, actually, I asked the various doctors, I said, is this just like flu? Because people die from the flu. And this is very unusual. And it is a little bit different, but in some ways it's easier and in some ways it's a little bit tougher. But we have it so well under control. I mean, we really have done a very good job. We have done an incredible job. We're going to continue. It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear. And from our shores, it could get worse before it gets better. It could maybe go away. We'll see what happens. Nobody really knows. I like this stuff. I really get it. People are surprised that I understand it. Every one of these doctors said, how do you know so much about this? Maybe I have a natural ability. Maybe I should have done that instead of running for president. Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting.
We'll get the right folks who could.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number on the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me. But I guess I'm doing okay because, to the best of my knowledge, I'm the President of the United States, despite the things that are said. I carry the mask when I have to go. I went into Walter Reed Hospital the other day. I have the mask right here, and I carry it, and I will use it gladly. No problem with it. So it sort of is curious. A man works for us, with us, very closely, Dr. Fauci, and Dr. Birx, also highly thought of. And yet they're highly thought of, but nobody likes me. It can only be my personality, that's all.
So that's Donald Trump, the way he's been speaking about this pandemic over the last few months. Well, it's got pretty serious for him pretty quickly this week. Now, the physician to President Donald Trump says that he remains fatigued but is in good spirits and is being evaluated by a team of experts who are making recommendations to the first couple on the next steps. Earlier, Democratic nominee Joe Biden and his wife Jill Biden tested negative for COVID-19. Well, for more on this, let's catch you up with New York correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Thanks so much indeed, Sherwin. A lot has been happening this week. One never thought that we'd be having this conversation tonight, although he doesn't wear a mask a lot. And so maybe statistically, this might have been something that would have been coming.
Just another slow Friday easing us into the weekend, Peter. I mean, it took us all a bit by surprise. We were sort of hoping to ease into the weekend, but this news dropping early this morning. Of course, speculation was rife overnight when Hope Hicks, the confirmation came through that his advisor, very close advisor, Hope Hicks, had tested positive, and the speculation was rife, of course, given her close proximity to the first couple, the president in particular, traveling with him on Air Force One and Marine One to all his campaign stops, was at the debate with him, was at a rally in Minnesota this week, but stayed home when he traveled to a fundraiser in New Jersey last night because she was beginning to feel sick. But the president still continued with his campaign fundraising trip to New Jersey. I'll tell you what we've just received from Dr. Sean Connolly, the president's physician, is some indication as to how he is being treated right now. They tell us, earlier on it was his symptoms were mild. Now they tell us it's a low-grade fever with some congestion and cough, certainly according to certain reporting, not from the doctor, but certain sourcing that local media has found out. He says that he's receiving a single 8-gram dose of Regeneron polyclonal antibody cocktail, which I've Googled because I'm not an epidemiologist, so I'm certainly not a doctor. It's a virus-neutralizing antibody medication. In addition to that, Trump is getting zinc, vitamin D, famotidine, melatonin, and daily aspirin. So that's the cocktail of medication that's being administered to the President of the United States. The First Lady's condition, Melania, we're told she remains well with only mild cough and a headache. The remainder of the First family has tested negative. Of course, the entire family traveled with President Trump to that debate against Joe Biden in Cleveland, Ohio on Tuesday. We just saw Joe Biden speak in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Peter, it was a campaign stop that was also in doubt earlier today because Joe Biden had been in such close proximity to the president. So there was a lot of caution from the Biden campaign wanting to have the vice president and his family tested. They have done 2 tests today, and both those tests have come back negative. He spoke just a short time ago, emphasizing the importance of wearing masks, calling for a national mask mandate, which has been absent to date in the United States. A mask mandate, testing that is available to everyone, called for transparency, but also said that their prayers were with the First family at this time. I want to play Mark Meadows, Peter. Mark Meadows is the chief of staff to the president. He spoke with the president earlier, and this is what he said to a gaggle of reporters at the White House.
As all of you know, the president and the first lady tested positive for COVID-19. They remain in good spirits. The president does have mild symptoms, and as we look to try to make sure that not only his health and safety and welfare is good, we continue to look at that for all of the American people. He continues to be not only in good spirits but very energetic. We've talked a number of times this morning. I got the 5 or 6 things that he had tasked me to do, like I do every single morning, and he is certainly wanting to make sure that we stay engaged.
So just to reconfirm, a low-grade fever, congestion, and cough, that's through sourcing from local media. And Joe Biden speaking a short time ago saying that this cannot be a partisan moment anymore. It is an American moment. So really, again, reiterating that he wants to be a president, not just for those who vote for him, but for everybody, Peter.
All right. So you read that list of the medication that he's taking, and I was waiting to hear hydroquinone. Not there.
Hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine, yes. Not there. All right.
Well,
so
he'd been treated for 2 weeks, apparently, on hydroxychloroquine, used as a prophylactic. What a prophylactic means is it's a preventative medication. But the efficacy of the drug, of course, was brought into question most recently last week. In fact, it could have been earlier this week. There was a new study that was released, Peter, that was stopped midway because the results were just not that convincing. So hydroxychloroquine has not been proven to be an effective drug. And I think the proof, or the proof is in the pudding here, in that President Donald Trump, despite having taken this as a prophylactic, has now tested positive for COVID-19.
All right, so what happens next? I mean, when one thinks about the number of people that he's been in contact with, particularly senior figures, cabinets, and more recently, the new nominee for the Supreme Court.
Where have you been and who have you spoken to, and how close or proximity might that have been? So Hope Hicks is the first example. Who did she come into contact with? I mean, the White House is a very small building where people, essentially don't wear masks after they receive their morning test arriving at the office in the morning. And I think that also just speaks to the efficacy of tests. Tests give you a snapshot as to how you are right now, what's going on right now. The minute that test result comes back, one has to go back to zero and you have to start again. again. This is why the efficacy of masks and social distancing and washing your hands has proven to be much more effective, even when you get tested, as staff at the White House do. So they are really now trying to contact trace everybody that's come into contact with the first couple, everybody that is come into contact with Hope Hicks, and that's a large number of people. The president was at a fundraiser in New Jersey. Who did he come into contact at that private fundraiser? Were they wearing masks? Probably not. Were they handshakes? Very likely. The campaign events that he attended in Minnesota earlier this week, no masks, the president on stage. How many people did he come into contact with? The campaign staff, which is a different operation to the White House staff. And of course, a number of his aides travel with him on Air Force One, travel with him on Marine One, where the air is recirculated. Everybody's breathing the same air in these very small confined spaces. So the challenge now becomes, who did the president come into contact with, and how are they now going to try and identify these people, and how is it going to affect the operations of both government and the campaign? Listen to Mark Meadows again about testing at the White House.
We've tested all of our core staff, and I can tell you that Mr. Kushner, Mr. Scavino, myself, a number of us have been tested, have come back with negative results, and yet at the same time, I fully expect that as this virus continues to go on, other people in the White House will certainly have a positive test result, and we've got the mitigation plan in place to make sure that the government not only continues to move forward, but the work of the American people continues to move forward.
I will also just point out, Peter, that Mark Meadows is not wearing a mask, despite what he was talking about and what that meant for mask wearing and social distance. A strange moment coming out and talking to the press again without a mask.
And talking about that, I mean, we saw the press secretary also not wearing a mask. I'm sure that there's been quite a bit of fallout with people reacting. What have New Yorkers been saying?
Yeah, very interestingly, you'll remember that Donald Trump a few months ago changed his address from New York City to Mar-a-Lago down in Palm Beach, Florida. The fight back against a New York population that perhaps hasn't embraced him as much as he might have liked. Sent cameras onto the streets earlier today to speak to those very New Yorkers, and this is what they had to say.
I think that it's going to put some fear into folks. If he does get out of this alive, God's willing, with health, I think he's going to continue with the rhetoric as it's not, so bad. So that's something that does scare me. I don't want him to come out of it thinking that it really doesn't affect families, because it really is affecting folks. But again, I just hope for a speedy recovery. I do think it might be something that is going to have a negative effect on the stock markets.
It absolutely scares me, and what scares me even more is that he hosted a bunch of rallies telling his supporters that there was no virus to be scared of, and here he has it, a few weeks later, right? Just a few days ago at a debate, he was telling his supporters that there was nothing to be concerned about. He took all the precautions, but really, this is what we were scared of. And if our leader of our own country has it, I mean, it's still out there, and people have to be worried.
So it's really scary to think that now he has it, and so now he has to deal with it, and he has to think about all of those same remedies and same fake treatments that he's made up and has told people oh yeah, you can just deal with it this way, with injecting yourself with bleach and things like that. It's very disturbing.
Why didn't he listen to the scientists? That's what I continue asking. Why?
Question.
Two things that jump out at me from those Voxies, Peter. They mentioned the stock market, the Dow Jones closing down 134 points at the close. What do markets not like? Uncertainty. What is the health of the president? That's uncertain now. That has a direct impact of where we go from here. The other thing to jump out from one person is talking about possible, a worsening of the condition and possible death. What does that mean for the campaign? What does that mean for succession in the United States? There is a succession map laid out out very clearly in terms of the Constitution. The vice president would step in. If the president is incapacitated, the president can write a letter. If he's too ill to say, I'm handing over power to the vice president, he can then write a letter much later to say that I can take over my responsibilities again, and then he will resume the full authority of the presidency. But if he were to become incapacitated, it moves to the VP. If the VP is positive and is incapacitated as well, Nancy Pelosi is second in line to the presidency.
All right, so a lot of things are up in the air now as a result of this diagnosis. We have 2 more debates that were scheduled to take place. We've got Kamala Harris versus Mike Pence next week. What do we know, if anything, about these debates?
Well, we know that it's now confirmed that the debates will go, essentially the vice presidential debate will go ahead on I believe it's October 7th, between Vice President Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. That's going to go ahead. It will probably be a more substantive, more sensible discussion than what we saw last Tuesday between a very angry Donald Trump, really not giving Biden the space to speak at all. So that's going to go ahead, and that will probably be much more substantive. But I cannot tell you whether the next presidential debate on, I believe it's October 13th, and then another one closer to the end of the month, is going to go ahead at all, because the president's condition will determine how we move from here, how this campaign moves from here. Is it going to become a virtual campaign now? Will the president be able to make an appearance soon? Because that is going to calm and allay fears in this country as to his condition. But from what we're understanding now, from mild symptoms was the language used earlier this morning, to now having a fever, being fatigued, congestion and cough. That doesn't sound like an improvement from mild symptoms. It sounds like a deterioration, and we'll have to watch this very, very closely. Just spare a thought for all the journalists covering the White House this weekend.
All right. I mean, people will speculate how much political capital he may have lost over this affair, because he was encouraging people almost not to wear masks. And now, the commander-in-chief is in quarantine and dealing with a fever. And then, of course, it's that his aide, it had to be leaked that the White House wasn't the one that told people about what was happening. And then even after they found out that somebody that he came into contact with had tested positive, what did he do? He got onto a helicopter and went to New Jersey. This can't be something that's ringing well with the people in America.
It depends on which people in America you're talking about. I don't think this moves the needle with any of his supporters. They've been so loyal despite everything. And I think this, in many ways, it's drawing the sympathy card among those supporters. Yes, I believe there are probably independents, those sliver of voters that perhaps hadn't decided who they were going to back in this election. Perhaps they will be angry. Maybe, we need the polling to come out to see if Joe Biden has extended his average of 8-point lead, certainly in national polling. What are the swing states going to do now? There was even speculation that this was all a hoax, that the president was now in hiding because his taxes were coming out, and that was something he didn't want to confront. And after his horrible debate performance, that he just sort of wanted to sort of hide in the White House bunker. But that's just all chatter. That's all chatter on social media. It's a skeptical element, part of this population that is so against this president just because they just don't feel him, given his last 3.5 years in office. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see where we go from here in terms of how this campaign develops, how we, what happens as we move closer to November 3rd. But I will say this, it's advantage Joe Biden now. He has the ascendancy here after that debate performance, after this COVID-19 diagnosis of the president. This has been a bad week for Donald Trump.
All right, Sherwin, that's where we'll leave it for the time being. But I suspect even with the next 24 hours, so much more can still happen in a day in America. Thanks so much indeed, Sherwin.